have a set of principles that you live by, which I think there is not enough of. And I think that is kind of missing, right? What's missing is, what are the rules for life, right? I think it's interesting that Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, is that's what it's called, and it's such a hit.
Yeah.
I think it shows that people are like grasping for rules for life. You can't just live on autopilot. In the world that we live in now, if you just drift along, if you just go with the flow, it generally leads to misery, right? It leads to bad outcomes. So you have to have like a set of rules by which you decide how to do things. And you have to have these principles that allow you to say, even though this is the harder choice right now, I live by these principles, so this is what I'm doing. And again, to me, that is like connected to the warrior's way, right? Because it's like you have your code essentially. And yeah, you do the thing because it's the right thing, even if it's the hard thing.
Yeah. It's like, it's core values, essentially, right? Are there some that you can share just as an example? If someone's like, oh,
yeah,
how do I create my own, code, my own principles?
I mean, that's an interesting question, right? I think that is, I mean, the short answer for me to that is through writing. You have to think about it and think about, well, what is important to me? Where do I draw the line? Stuff like that, right? But yeah, like for me, an example of that in my own life is the idea that I want to live in such a way that my word has weight. We've talked about that as like living with integrity, right? And so that's one of the principles I live by, where it's like, if I said I'm going to do something, then I'm going to go really, really far to make sure I do it. Even if it's very, very difficult, even if it would be much easier not to do it. And even if no one is telling me, hey, by the way, you should do it, right?
Right.
So even if there's like no downside to quitting and a lot of downside to doing it anyway, I choose to do that, right?
Yeah. Well, the downside to quitting is like, I didn't do what I said.
Yeah. You have to then live with that.
That's worse, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that would be an example. And again, like the idea of using every opportunity to use your own strength in the service of others, right? Is also like just a rule I live by, where it's like, if there's ever a choice between here's a selfish thing to do that's just for me, and here's something that's maybe not as good for me, but it's good for someone else, it's in service of someone else, or it's in service of something I believe is right, then I'm going to make that choice, even though it's the harder choice.
As long as you believe it's right, not just self-sacrificing for the sake of it.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't just want to be going around self-sacrificing every chance you get, because that is actually kind of a behavior that some people have, right? We're just constantly trying to crucify themselves.
Yeah. It's like, what is it called? Martyr syndrome or something?
Yeah. And again, that would be an example of like dealing with your emotional shit and confronting the brutal facts, where it's like, listen, you're not actually doing this selflessly. You're actually just doing this compulsively, right?
Yeah. You're just rationalizing that it's for the greater good or whatever.